Welcome to Book to Film Studies. My name is Don, and today we're looking at film adaptations of Richard Matheson's 1954 sci-fi horror novella I Am Legend. This novella tells the story of Robert Neville, the last man left alive on Earth after plague turns the rest of the world's population into vampire zombie creatures. It has been adapted for screen 4 times. But which is the most faithful to the original text? I've watched all 4 film versions and scored them in terms of characters, elements, and plot points for faithfulness to the text. A document with the elements in each category can be found in a link in the description for this video. These versions include a 1964 black and white version starring Vincent Price titled The Last Man on Earth, a 1971 version starring Charlton Heston titled The Omega Man, a 2007 version starring Will Smith titled I Am Legend, and a direct-to-video 2007 version starring Mark Dacascos titled I Am Omega. Warning: possible spoilers ahead. For characters, a point is awarded if the character appears. Since names are sometimes changed in versions, a character gets a point if they appear and it's supposed to be the one in the book. For example, the main character, Robert Neville, is named differently in some versions. If there is a particularly interesting part of the character's description that should be included in a portrayal, I include that as a bonus point, such as Ruth having red hair. There are 13 possible character points. For elements, points are awarded if an element is present, a future setting for example. Partial points can be given, for example, if Neville listens to music but it's not classical. There are 23 possible element points. For plot points, points are given if the plot point happens. Bonus points are given if a detail is present in the plot point, such as the types of books Neville finds in a library. There are 27 possible plot points. There are 63 possible regular points. Other bonus points may be given for anything not in the 3 main categories that shows an attention to detail to the book. Departures or creative licenses are not counted against any version. I'm not concerned with what's different from the book, but what is the same. Departures will be mentioned if it seems like it hurts a score, such as if a new scene takes away time from a book scene that could have been included. This is not a list of my favorites or which I think is best, as I'll leave that up to you to decide, but which contains the most elements from the book. Comment below about which version you think is the most faithful, and then which is your favorite. Links to online videos of some of the versions not readily available on home video can be found in the description below. Characters. Our first character is Robert Neville, and as the main character he appears in all 4 versions, though in the Price version he is named Robert Morgan, and in the Dacascos version he is named Renchard. Ben Cortman, a former co-worker of Neville's who turned vampire, shows up only in the Price version. Vampires in general appear in all versions, though in the Heston version they are a brotherhood of albino mutants, and in Dacascos they are more zombie-like, moving around in the daylight. Virginia Neville, Robert's wife, appears in all versions but Heston. In Smith she is named Zoe, while in Dacascos she isn't named. Neville's daughter Kathy is in the same versions as Virginia, though in Smith she is named Marley, and in Dacascos the character is Neville's son, so half point for the character there. There is a dog in Price and Smith, though in Smith it is the family pet who is with Neville the entire time, rather than a stray. Ruth, an infected woman who lives with the disease, turns up in every version in some form. She is named properly in Price, while in Heston she is named Lisa, in Smith she is named Anna, and in Dacascos she is named Brianna. After all character points, Price leads with 8 points, with Heston in last place with 3.5 points. Elements. The novella takes place in 1976, 22 years after its publication. None of the versions takes place in a setting future enough to get a point for the setting. Price takes place in 1968 for a 1964 film. Heston takes place in 1977 for a 1971 film. Smith takes place in 2012 for a 2007 film. And there is no time frame mentioned in Dacascos. Neither do any of the versions begin in January. Neville has a bedroom turned into a workshop only in Price. In Smith, we actually see a child's bedroom still in pristine condition rather than turned into anything else. And Price is also the only version in which he has a mirror on his front door. Neville harvests garlic only in Price, though here he does not grow it near his house but finds it in a supermarket, so partial point. Neville also only makes stakes for hunting vampires in Price. Neville drives an old car in each version, though in Smith he drives a few different cars, so partial point. Neville listens to music to drown out the sounds of vampires or to reset himself in each version, but only in Dacascos is it classical. In Price and Heston it is jazz or jazz-inspired, and in Smith he listens to Bob Marley. In the novella, Ben Cortman calls out "Come out, Neville" every night outside his house. This happens as depicted only in Price, though in Heston, a character named Matthias does say the same thing. There is a large pit for burning infected victims only in Price, and no version has Neville watching a version of Dracula for inspiration on how to defeat the disease. Neville drinks alcohol as a coping mechanism in each version but Smith. Neighboring houses are not burned down to prevent the vampires from getting onto Neville's house in any version, though Dacascos does have an area around his house cleared away. There are two types of vampires in the novella: infected humans who live with the disease, and victims who died but were reanimated by the germ. These show up in Price and Heston, though in Heston the undead are the albino mutants, and the other humans haven't turned into vampires yet, though a few characters show signs or have started. Neville uses a firearm in each version but Price. No version has Neville actively looking for Cortman during the day to eliminate him. Neville smokes cigarettes in the novella, which he then exchanges for a pipe later on. Only Price has him smoking cigarettes, though he doesn't change to a pipe, so partial point. Ruth is supposed to have a temporary tan to hide her pale vampire skin, which comes off, and no version shows this. Ruth also leaves a note after knocking out Neville explaining the situation and warning Neville to flee. This happens only in Price, though there is not a written note as Ruth explains it to Neville in person, so partial point. The new breed of vampires, infected humans who have learned to live with the disease, hunt down the undead variety, including Cortman, only in Price. Neville is to be executed only in Price and Heston, though in Price it is accurately by the new breed, though they don't capture him first, and in Heston it is by the albino mutants, who are the undead in this version, so partial point for Heston. And unfortunately, Neville does not say "I am legend" in any version. After all element points, Price still leads with 20 points, though Dacascos has moved into second place, and Smith and Heston have dropped to third and fourth, respectively. Plot points. Vampires surround Neville's house on a nightly basis in Price and Heston, while Neville has a daily routine of varying tasks in each version. Neville goes to a store of some sort for supplies in Heston, Smith, and Dacascos, though in Smith he only visits a DVD store, getting other supplies from abandoned houses. Neville takes vampire bodies to the burning pit only in Price. Neville visits his wife's crypt only in Price, yet doesn't find a vampire there in this or any version. Neville takes a vampire woman home to test cures only in Smith. His watch stops, prompting a race home in panic in none of the versions, though in Price, Heston, and Smith he is caught outside after dark in one way or another and has to race home. In Price he stays too long and falls asleep at the crypt. In Heston he just loses track of time while out, and in Smith he gets caught in a trap. For Dacascos, the vampires are more like zombies who constantly attack him during the day, so there is no fear to be outside at night. Vampires attack Neville at his home due to his watch stopping in each version, though in Dacascos, as stated, they attack him regularly throughout the day, so partial point. Neville replaces his car after the vampires destroy it in Price and Heston. Smith has a few cars he uses, and they're not destroyed. There is a flashback scene for Virginia and Kathy becoming sick, and for Neville burying Virginia, only in Price. Neville does not visit a library for research in any version, though he does perform research in both Heston and Smith. In Price, Heston, and Smith he was a scientist prior to the disease hitting, so he works on it throughout those versions. But in Heston he gets a partial point for trying a blood serum, and in Smith he has a lab in his basement he uses for experiments. The stray dog appears only in Price, as Smith's dog is the family dog, though both dogs do turn vampiric and die. No version has a flashback scene for Neville getting taken to a tent revival meeting prior to the disease reaching the apex point. Ruth appears in all versions, and Neville takes Ruth home in all versions but Dacascos. In that version, Neville has to rescue her from the city. Smith is rescued by Ruth from the trap and gets to his house that way, so partial point. Neville tests Ruth with garlic to get a reaction in only Price. No version shows Neville taking Ruth's blood to test, Ruth knocking out Neville, or Neville being captured by the new breed. Price runs away from the new breed, who hunt him down, while Heston has a battle with the albino mutants, eventually being killed. Smith gets cornered by the undead vampires, and Dacascos again is not really threatened by the zombies. Neville commits suicide in only the Smith version, taking out the undead with a grenade instead of using a poison pill provided by Ruth. After all plot points, Price still leads with 34 points, with Smith overtaking second place, Heston taking third, and Dacascos falling into fourth place. Bonus points. Bonus points go to Smith for having the actual title of the book as its title, Price and Heston for mentioning the disease as an airborne germ, and Price for having Virginia return from being buried, and for mentioning Neville was bitten by a bat while stationed in Panama that may have already bitten someone with the germ, which is probably why he's immune to the disease. Price also gets a point for Cortman climbing a building to escape the new breed, while Heston gets a point for him actually mentioning Neville's Anglo-German heritage. After bonus points are figured in, Price retains its wire-to-wire lead with 38 points. Smith is the runner-up with 19.5 points, barely ahead of Heston at 18.5 points, with Dacascos coming in last at 13.5 points. While Price earned 60% of possible points, the others didn't get more than 30%. We do not have a version that includes a future setting, beginning in January, has Neville watching Dracula, burned down neighboring houses, hunting for Cortman, Ruth's tan coming off, Neville saying I am legend, a vampire in Virginia's crypt, Neville visiting a library, a flashback to the tent meeting, Neville testing Ruth's blood, Ruth knocking out Neville, or Neville being captured. Is there a version I missed you think is more faithful than any of these? Comment below and I'll check it out. Are there other book to film adaptations you'd like to see featured? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.